Okay, good morning. Let's get started. I'm Cienki, and my topic today, as you can see, is to do with simultaneous and sequential alignment of speech and gesture in conversation. And I will be kindly interpreted as I go along.
Buenos días. El elemento simultáneo secuencial de habla y gesto en la conversación.
So there are different views of what constitutes alignment, and basically I'll be using the term alignment in a loose way to talk about different people doing similar things to each other.
Hay un poco de abuso en el concepto de alineamiento y de manera tal de que hay gente que abusa el concepto pero hace cosas diferentes en la práctica.
And there are different views of what constitutes alignment in the literature. One view that's become well known is that of Pickering and Garrett, which has to do with very automatic behaviors.
Hay diferentes visiones sobre lo que es alineamiento y una que ha sido implementada, la de Pickering y Garrett, que se enfoca en las conductas muy automáticas y prácticas.
But there are other views of alignment as well, and some other views have to do with more intentional kinds of cooperation, which people might be more aware of to different degrees, might be more conscious of, and we can.
Pero hay otras visiones que son un poco distintas y que hablan de una intencionalidad mucho mayor y que la gente está más consciente de lo que está haciendo.
We can see that in different forms of behavior, partly by the degree of effort that people are exerting, and sometimes we also see it by their visual attention. If they're attending, looking at their own behaviors, they might be more conscious of what they're doing.
Si podemos ver eso en los distintos grados de esfuerzo o trabajo que le representa hacer las cosas a la gente y en la mirada, el foco atencional de la mirada, que refleja alguna clase de conciencia de lo que están haciendo.
So we can say that there's a kind of continuum kinds of more conscious processes that we're less aware of, and others being more conscious processes.
De manera que hay un contexto donde se puede ver que hay procesos que son más conscientes y otros que son mucho menos conscientes.
We can also talk about a relation between alignment and intersubjectivity in the sense of sharing some kind of experiential content, which can be feeling, perceptions, thought, or linguistic meanings.
Podemos ver que también hay un compartir contenido experiencial que se manifiesta en cosas como sentimientos, percepciones, significado y pensamiento.
And the specific context in which I'll be talking about this alignment of behaviors is that of collaborative remembering. That is when people in a group are trying to remember something together.
Y el contexto específico con el que voy a estar hablando lo que se llama recuerdo colaborativo, en el que diferentes personas tratan de recordar algo.
And this is work that I did with Lucas Bietti, who is now in Switzerland, but in 2012, 2013, he had a postdoc and was working with me in Amsterdam.
Y es un trabajo que he hecho con Lucas Bietti, que está ahora en Suiza, pero que en 2012 y 2013 estaba vivo en Holanda.
So I have to give due credit to Lucas Bietti for turning me on to this research topic. This is his current blog, his website, Collected Memory. So I refer you to that if you want to follow up on what he's doing and this kind of thing.
De manera que tengo que darle crédito por haberme entusiasmado con esta investigación y esto que se llama memoria colectiva, Collected Memory, que pueden ver si quieren saber un poco.
So, collaborative remembering. It's something that we do well, maybe on a regular basis, but it's a common thing where people are trying to do something together and they're trying to recall something that they did together in order to, for some particular function.
Recuerdo colaborativo es algo bastante cotidiano que se puede ver muy frecuentemente y se trata básicamente de personas que tratan de recordar algo de manera colectiva.
And we can see this playing out in different contexts, and one context is, for example, there's some research on older people who are trying to remember something together, and they can in fact help each other and as a group remember something that neither of them individually could remember.
Y eso se puede ver, por ejemplo, en parejas de personas mayores que pueden recordar juntas cosas que de manera individual no pueden recordar.
For some of the slides, I'm going to turn it over directly to the interpreter because I don't need to read the text that's on the slide for the few native speakers of English in the audience. This is one of those slides. So, the research questions.
Okay. Las preguntas de investigación. ¿De qué manera abordan los participantes los procesos compartidos que se dan al recordar el tiempo real? Los roles que tienen los roles que tienen el comportamiento, los gestos manuales, la postura del cuerpo y la realidad. Es decir, que en algunos el alineamiento conductual en los recuerdos compartidos.
And there's a good deal of experimental research on some of these topics, and one of the goals that Lucas and I had was to try to find some more ecologically valid methods to research this topic.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, just the bottom line, so that we believe that there is a need for more ecologically valid methodology in this research, and not just research in controlled settings where you're eliciting specific behaviors.
Ok, entonces queremos con Lucas que hay una metodología más ecológicamente válida que va un poco más allá del entorno de la agricultura.
So this was a project then that we worked on in the internal memory studies, multimodal alignment during collective remembering, and so the topics I'll talk about here are largely drawn from this paper and another paper.
Este trabajo que hicimos y está publicado en este paper y voy a hablar de los resultados que tuvimos.
So for this research, Lucas worked with two different groups of people. One is a group of close friends, the others are 4 members of a family. And since Lucas is from Argentina, then it was easy for him to go to Buenos Aires and collect this material. And then they're all native speakers of Spanish.
Hay dos grupos de que participaron en esto. Se juntaron las realizaciones, 4 eran amigos, 4 eran amigos de la familia, hablantes nativos de español, argentino.
So they had different topics to talk about. The group of friends was talking about a vacation at the resort, and the family members were also talking about a vacation that they took.
Había dos tópicos diferentes en esto. Los 4 amigos hablaron de las vacaciones en un resort y los 4 miembros de la familia discutieron, hablaron sobre un viaje a Maui.
And these were all recorded in 2011, so it was about a year or so after they had actually taken these trips together.
Se grabó esto en agosto del 2011, más o menos un año después de que hubiera pasado el viaje.
They were asked to bring some kind of objects with them so that they could use that as a stimulus to talk about the experience, and in each case they chose photos that they had to talk about.
Se les pidió que trajeran objetos de manera tal que tuvieran estímulos que permitieran hablar, interactuar, y los dos grupos eligieron fotos.
The idea was that they were going to talk about these pictures and 2 different sessions with each group, one where they had the photos and another later where they did not have the photos. And today I'll focus on the sessions where they had the photos, and this gave us this amount of data for the 2 different groups.
La idea era hablar a partir de las fotos que pudieron hablar, se pudieron conversar y recordar, y en realidad hubo 2 sesiones por grupo, una en que el grupo tenía las fotos y otra sesión después donde tenían que recordar sin las fotos. Hoy día va a hablar básicamente de la sesión donde había fotos.
We looked at a number of different kinds of behavior to try to get at this topic, and taking a multimodal perspective, then we looked at speech, the torso, posture, manual gestures, facial expressions, and also eye gaze directions. And within each category, we had these different distinctions.
Okay. Se adoptó una perspectiva básicamente multimodal y se observó habla, postura, gestos, expresión facial y dirección de la mirada.
So I want to start with one example, which we will first listen to, and then we'll see the video, so we can see what's going on. So we'll listen to the, this is the first example of the group of friends that are talking together. They're looking at one photo and discussing a particular photo. It's a strange photo.
Estos son los 4 amigos que están viendo una foto y hablando sobre una foto extraña.
medio revisar esa foto, porque estamos todos en ropa interior, con un palo en la mano, ella ya es de la realidad, faltaba, vos gordo andás.
So you can see they're figuring out who was missing in the picture. What's actually kind of funny is who asked the question, who is missing from the picture, is the one who took the picture.
Lo extraño acá es que la persona que preguntó quién faltaba en la fotografía y la persona que había sacado la fotografía.
So let's now see what happened when they were.
Veamos lo que sucedió cuando la
medio revisar esa foto, porque estamos todos en ropa interior, con un palo en la mano, ella ya es de la realidad, faltaba. Vos gordo andás.
So it turns out he's the one who was actually missing from the photo we took. Let's look at that example one more time, and this time you can also look at what's going on with their different behaviors as they're trying to recall who took this photo when the photo was down on the table.
En el video y en esta vez tratamos de ver qué ocurre con las distintas conductas que hacen mientras están viendo la foto.
Medio revisar esa foto, porque estamos todos en ropa interior, con un palo en la mano, ella ya es de la realidad, faltaba. Vos gordo andás.
One of the things that I want to point out is how this structure came into being, where they all end up sitting in this formation where they each have their right hand up at their chin, they're bending over, they're looking at the photo, and even their torsos are then all at this kind of same degree of looking at the picture.
Una de las cosas que va a ver en el momento es cómo llegó a suceder este proceso en el que los cuatro participantes adoptan una configuración determinada con una cierta, con la mano en la pera, el torso inclinado hacia el fondo.
Medio revisar esa foto, porque estamos todos en ropa interior, con un palo en la mano.
So we start out at the one point with just the one guy is here with us in the position.
Empezamos con el momento solamente uno de los participantes en la posición.
Ella ya es de la realidad, faltaba.
A little further, and then silence.
Y luego silencio.
So they're in this focused position all this way.
Están en esta posición de estar enfocando.
And then
Ella ya es de la realidad.
it explodes. So then at this point, it all breaks up. The problem is solved.
Y luego se disuelve la configuración y el problema está resuelto.
So what we did in looking at this is track these different behaviors in different tiers, quantifying by half seconds what was going on with all of these different behaviors. And basically, the higher the line is on this graph, then the more of these behaviors were playing out at that moment.
Lo que hicimos fue dividir estos comportamientos en capas y analizarlas cada 500 milisegundos. Y básicamente lo que dice este gráfico es que entre más alta la línea, más se produce el comportamiento.
So this gives us a way to visualize what's going on and then the sudden breakup of the behaviors as the question gets answered.
De manera que esto nos permite ver lo que está sucediendo y luego la repentina solución de la cosa y la resolución del problema.
So in a sense, we have a kind of vertical alignment that is a certain simultaneous alignment of different behaviors playing out at the same time. which you could think of as resonating in a sense with each other across the different modalities, that is across eye gaze, gesture, posture, speech.
De manera que tenemos una especie de alineamiento simultáneo vertical en el que conductas se expresan en las diferentes modalidades, línea, decir, habla, postura, mirada.
And what's interesting is we can also then, in this connection with remembering together, we can look at these processes of aligned, both the tension and then the relaxation as kind of evidence of experiencing something together, sharing in their thinking at the moment.
De manera que lo que podemos ver acá es que el proceso de tensión y relajación que se alinea y que son una evidencia de la conducta, de compartir pensamiento y coordinar.
So this is one pattern that we saw happening at different times in the data, this kind of simultaneous clusters.
De manera que un patrón tiene una especie de conglomerado o simultáneo.
And now let's look at another example and see a different way in which alignment played out in some of the rhythm.
Veamos entonces otro ejemplo que es una forma diferente de observar.
The family, remembering their trip, looking at the vacation in Hawaii.
Y esta es la familia que está recordando su vacación en Hawái.
So, same thing, we'll listen first to what they said. Basically, it's kind of chaos. It's all kinds of things going on. Let's look at what's going on while they are talking about that.
Veamos qué sucede mientras hablan.
So we want to look at that takes place here again.
Vamos a ver la secuencia de eventos que ocurre.
So here we can see a different kind of alignment taking place, and we see this sequence of pointing that gets traded between the three different participants.
Acá podemos ver otra forma de alineamiento donde hay una secuencia de gestos que se van replicando.
There are a lot of details that could be analyzed in this interaction, which I'm not going to go into, but just briefly, one of the interesting factors is that we also see it's not just a matter of that goes from person to person, but it's also a matter of the eye gaze interaction. Also touch comes into play. Who is seeing whom, so that we can see that in advance, before the pointing happens, this eye gaze connection taking place. So it's not just a random kind of pointing that was taking place.
Okay, hay muchísimos detalles sobre los cuales se puede entrar a analizar esto, pero lo que quiero básicamente enfatizar es que además del gesto de apuntar, hay muchas otras cosas que están ocurriendo como la postura de la mano y la situación de la mirada.
And if we analyze this in that same way of counting how many of these different behaviors that were like each other were happening at the same time, then we also see visualize it with a very different kind of pattern. So this is basically this graph of what we saw happening with the pointing.
De manera que si graficamos de la misma manera que lo hicimos antes, vamos a ver que el patrón es bastante diferente.
And this we therefore call the horizontal kind of alignment, basically sequential, is then structured temporally and plays out in terms of different dynamic processes.
De manera que esto nos permite hablar de un elemento secuencial horizontal que se ocurre temporalmente y que se da en distintas partes de la interacción.
And then we can compare these different kinds of alignment, the simultaneous, where we saw the one-by-one formation and then the simultaneous breakup, versus the sequential, where there was also this one-by-one copying in different ways, but then with different variations of what each was doing.
De manera que podemos ver cómo en los alineamientos simultáneos hay una configuración final que en la que se
And At the end is a kiss.
Hay un beso final.
So what looks like it could be a confrontational kind of exchange when you read it. Look at you being smart. Smart, you're stupid. It's actually not.
Lo que
But no.
parece como un diálogo confrontacional o una discusión, en realidad no lo es.
And one of Dubois' points is by looking at the structures that they're trading back and forth syntactically, we see how they're actually highly engaged with each other in their interaction.
Y lo que dice, bueno, si uno revisa la estructura sintáctica que está intercambiando, se puede ver como en realidad están de alguna manera colaborando.
So he developed this way of breaking up their speech into these, to see these parallel structures that they're using, and he calls this a diagraph. He made up this word. It's a diagram, it's a graph, it's a way of breaking up the syntactic structure.
De manera que inventó un sistema para analizar esto y descomponerlo, y esto lo llamó diágrafo, que es una combinación de diagrama y gráfico, que permite desglosar.
In some ways, it looks at traditional patterns of syntactic structures. So we have here a noun phrase, we have a verb to be, we have a predicate adjective.
De alguna manera, esto compone, siguiendo la teoría gramatical tradicional, hay una frase nominal, una cópula y un adjetivo.
But in terms of what they're doing interactionally, it's a kind of paradigm that they're repeating, repeating these different forms of noun phrases, different forms of the verb to be, and then repeating or contrasting what kind of adjective they're using.
Pero si lo vemos en un plano matemático, vemos que hay una regularidad constancia, hay diferentes formas de que sea el verbo ser, y una aparición sobre el adjetivo, pero es parecido.
And what Dubois says is that this shows not only a parallelism in the kinds of structures that they're using, but he says that reflects resonance across the syntactic structures, the lexical items, the intonation patterns they're using, which then shows this higher degree of engagement between the speakers.
Y lo que dice Dubois, este paralelismo muestra de alguna manera una especie de resonancia que probablemente que se da en múltiples niveles del lenguaje.
Back to our example of who took the photo, and look at the exchange that took place there.
Si volvemos al ejemplo de que hay una fotografía y vemos la conversación,
and break it up in the same way, you can see highly repetitive pattern, but then that shows also another way in which they were highly engaged with each other in this interaction, leading to this simultaneous sharing of behaviors in their position.
que hay una alta repetición de ítems y que de alguna manera esto va evolucionando en una convergencia final.
And it's interesting to compare that with the other exchange about the waterfall, la cascada, and then to see there weren't so many patterns that we can find that fit this same type of dialogic syntax. Here I just found one exchange that matched in that way.
Y en el otro ejemplo de la familia se puede ver que no hay muchos patrones que funcionan o converjan de la misma manera, y esto es lo único que podemos encontrar en esa conversación.
And it's not simply a matter of repeating the same thing. If we go back, we also see these variations become important in terms of taking different stances on the question or what it is that the topic is that they're talking about.
Y no se trata solo de repetir algunas cosas, sino mira esto, va a ver que hay unas ciertas variaciones que dan cuenta de puntos de vista, expresión de puntos de vista.
So if we come back to our what is being aligned, we have the forms that they're exchanging, including intonation patterns, but we can also look at what the functions are that they're on which they're aligning with each other.
De manera que si volvemos acá podemos ver que no solamente las formas que se están alineando, sino que hay algo que tiene que ver con la función y los significados que ellos están.
And we can do the same thing looking at gesture behavior or other behaviors, comparing these forms and functions and how they're relating to each other.
Y podemos hacer lo mismo viendo gestos o conductas gestuales y ver cómo interactúan forma y función en ellos.
And we can see, in some ways, we can talk about them doing the same thing, and I put same in quotation marks because what is the same and what is different is a matter of degree and how you're structuring your categories, how you're including things as the same or different.
De verdad que podemos ver que hacen la misma, que hay cosas que son iguales, son la misma está entre comillas, porque en realidad hay algunas variaciones en esas cosas aprender un poquitito de cómo se la analice.
And essentially, we can then say there's a continuum between what's the same thing that they're doing and what are different things that they're doing.
Y seguramente se puede ver continuo entre ratos que están haciendo lo mismo, entre comillas, y cosas que son, y están haciendo cosas que son diferentes.
We can look at how the alignment is taking place, the degree to which it's simultaneous, or the degree to which it's sequential, and again, we have a kind of continuum.
Y de la misma manera podemos hacer lo mismo en el sentido de cómo se hace esto, en el sentido de simultáneo o secuencial, y vamos a tener de nuevo un continuo.
We can think of this then in a more graphic pattern of how things are playing out, whether it's more simultaneous or sequential, and what is being replicated across the different speakers, the degree to which it's the same or different.
Podemos ver esto de manera en una flexibilidad donde hay cosas que son simultáneas o secuenciales y por otro lado, en el sentido de si son lo mismo o son diferentes de una forma funcional.
And this might provide a way to think of these different ways of talking about alignment or mirroring in some contexts, so that we can see if we have more of the same thing going on in the same way, that's more like a kind of simultaneous mirroring versus taking place in a different a longer time scale, then we have a more sequential kind of alignment playing.
I need you to repeat that.
Yeah, I'm just saying this, if it's more the same thing at the same time, simultaneous, same thing, different times, more sequential.
Okay, si hay, entonces si hay más de la misma cosa al mismo tiempo, más de la misma cosa al mismo tiempo, hay un pensamiento simultáneo, y si hay más de la misma forma o función en diferentes tiempos, hay un elemento secuencial.
And in this column, I'm thinking of it in terms of focus of attention.
En esta columna estamos pensando en términos de foco de atención.
But there might be other ways to think about this.
Pero puede haber otra forma de pensar al respecto.
And if we take this box, then we have, people are focusing on different things at different times. We might say that could be an instance of less engagement between interactions.
La última casilla de la derecha, hay gente que está pensando, que está haciendo cosas diferentes en diferentes tiempos, podemos pensar que están menos comprometidos, menos involucrados en interesantes.
But it's not necessarily less engagement between them. There could be other things going on as well.
Pero no necesariamente que estén menos involucrados, puede haber otras cosas que estén sucediendo.
But I also think it's interesting to look at this combination where we have people might be focusing on different things, but at almost exactly the same time in the interaction.
Bueno, por eso las personas pueden estar enfocadas en distintas cosas, pero prácticamente al mismo tiempo en la interacción.
And if we go back to the cascada and we think of that kind of chaotic, where we listen to the beginning.
Y si vamos al ejemplo de la cascada y pensamos en una especie de ruido caótico, que es muy curioso.
So we have her introducing this topic, and then the two speakers start at almost exactly the same time with then different points that they want to bring up about what was going on there.
Entonces tenemos que la mujer empieza el tópico y casi al mismo tiempo hay dos participantes que intervienen tratando de introducir otras cosas.
So that can also show a different kind of being on the same wavelength in a certain way, that they're both engaging with the topic, picking up on the same rhythm of the interaction, but then their focus of attention is very different at that moment.
De manera tal que podemos ver que de alguna manera están en la misma frecuencia, pero están enfatizando o introduciendo cosas que son levemente diferentes.
Part that I want to talk about today has to do with getting at this more in a more quantitative way.
La última parte que quiero ver es analizar. Básicamente, estas preguntas ocurren en el elemento más frecuentemente de lo que podría esperarse por simplizar. ¿Es simultáneo o es secuencial? ¿Cuáles son las características temporales del alineamiento secuencial?
And this is some work that we did that also resulted in another small paper on these temporal aspects of behavioral alignment.
Y entonces, aquí en este paper van a encontrar algunos resultados que vimos.
And so here we looked at simultaneous and sequential alignment, and define them in a particular way in order to operationalize them.
De manera que aquí vimos alineamiento secuencial y lo definimos de modo de poder operacionalizar.
So what we call simultaneous alignment in this study is we looked at time points where a given behavior was simultaneously performed by two or more participants, but simultaneous here means within half a second, within 500 milliseconds.
El alineamiento simultáneo lo que definimos puntos de tiempo en el que una conducta se manifestaba simultáneamente entre dos o más participantes dentro de 500 milisegundos.
And then for sequential alignment, we said these would be time points where a behavior was initiated sometime within 10 seconds after another participant had withdrawn that same behavior, so somewhere between 500 milliseconds and 10 seconds.
Y el alineamiento secuencial que hemos definido como el tiempo de punto donde una conducta se manifiesta inicial dentro de los 10 segundos después transcurrido para que el otro participante hubiera terminado esa conducta.
An enormous amount of coding of video data.
Codificar una cantidad enorme de datos de video.
So basically Lucas Cienki very attentively coded every 500 milliseconds in the video recordings for these different behaviors.
Básicamente lo que hizo Lucas Cienki fue codificar cada 500 milisegundos todo esto de video.
And a binary value was then assigned to each behavior for the three basic categories: the manual gestures, diegetic, non-manual gestures, with head nods, shoulder shrugs, and postural behaviors having to do with leaning forward or not, position of the hands, and the position of the hands in relation to the body.
Un código binario a 18 conductas, gestos manuales, que pueden ser dístico o no dístico, gestos no manuales, asentimiento de cabeza, hombro y postura conductual, o sea, conductas posturales.
So you can analyze all of these things, but then the question is, what do you do with it? One of our questions was, how likely is it that these different combinations of behaviors were due to chance, and how much were they something unusual in this interaction?
Esto me preguntó bien la pregunta de qué se hace con los datos, y lo que ellos hicieron fue hacerse una pregunta de cuánto de lo que está ocurriendo es efectivamente aleatorio y cuánto en realidad de personal.
And so, are three different people. So this, the more quantitative person in the group developed this idea of using what's called stratified resampling, which I'll explain.
Fue tratada por tres personas y hay alguien que tiene relaciones cuantitativas y estas posibilidades hicieron un rastreo de estratificado.
So if we take a sequence of behaviors, here we'll just abstractly call them ones and zeros.
Tenemos una secuencia de conducta que van a exactamente codificar exactamente 1 y 0.
For all of the participants and all of these different observed sequences of behaviors, we can then reshuffle them many times, reorder them.
Para todos los participantes y para todas las conductas que se observan, se pueden tomar esto y reordenar de manera aleatoria muchas veces.
And with this reshuffling, we then end up with a randomized order of possibilities of all these different behaviors.
Y con este reordenamiento se termina teniendo una configuración completamente aleatoria de todas las conductas.
So this gives us a kind of randomized baseline to look at, to compare the actual ordering of behaviors with a more randomized.
De manera que esto nos da una línea más aleatoria contra la cual podemos comparar el orden de las conductas.
So then we looked at to what degree the manual gesture, body posture, and eye gaze are aligned in simultaneous manners, and to what degree in sequential manners.
De una tarde que luego exploramos hasta qué punto los gestos manuales, la postura corporal y la fijación de la mirada, la evolución de la cabeza, están alineadas secuencial, o sea, de manera secuencial o simultánea.
And you can just continue.
Se contaron cuántas veces ocurría la alineamiento secuencial o simultáneo y se compararon las observaciones con la línea de base aleatoria.
So let's take a look first at the conversation between the friends.
Conversación entre los amigos.
And here we have three different graphs. We have the gesture, use, posture, and eye gaze.
Y hay tres gráficos distintos para los gestos, para la postura y para la expresión de la mirada.
So in each case, the blue is what we observed, and the red is the chance level.
Lo azul es lo que se observó y lo rojo es lo que es la rentabilidad.
And on the left, we have the simultaneous behaviors, and on the right, the sequential.
A la izquierda lo simultáneo y a la derecha lo secuencial.
So for the simultaneous alignment, this was only significantly higher than chance for eye gaze use in this case. And we have to also just bear in mind the scales are different in each of these. So here on the left, we have the highest is this is hundreds, 300s. Here we have thousands, 6,000 measurements. But here it's 10 to the 4th. So this is 25,000. So there were many, because eye gaze, and they were always looking, whereas they were not always using gesture.
Ok, cuántos simultáneos son resultados significativamente más altos que el azar para la mirada. Lo que hay que considerar es que las escalas de estos gráficos son diferentes. Si se ve el gráfico derecho, el eje Y está en 300, el gráfico está. El gráfico del medio está en 100.000, el gráfico de la derecha está ganando así como una cantidad grande, que es 2,5 multiplicado por 10 o 4, que no tengo idea.
25.000.
Entonces es muy grande.
25.000. Sí, o más.
So the simultaneous alignment was only higher in this case here for the eye gaze use.
Entonces, de manera que los simultáneos, el elemento simultáneo solo fue mayor para la mirada.
Whereas the sequential alignment rates were higher across all three behaviors.
Mientras que el elemento secuencial fue más alto de los tres tipos de alignment.
And it's also, we're doing these little error bars represent confidence intervals of 95% of the most probable alignment rates yielded by the different chance simulations.
Y acá se tiene la barra de error representa el intervalo de confianza del 95% para la simultánea. O sea, la muestra de general.
Significance, what was considered significant here is P is less than 0.05.
Y lo que se considera significativo son valores P inferiores a 0.05.
If we look at the family conversations,
si vemos la conversación de la familia,
and look at the simultaneous alignment, the rates were they were significantly lower than chance for gesture and not higher for any of the behaviors.
Si vemos lo que ocurre con simultáneo, lo que ocurre es que es más bajo para los gestos y no significativo para la mirada y postura.
But again, the sequential alignment rates were significantly higher than chance for all three of the behavior categories.
Pero otra vez, igual que antes, el elemento secuencial es increíblemente más alto que el azar.
So if we look at the temporal aspects of the sequential alignment, we see that sequential alignment occurs systematically, whereas the simultaneous alignment rates did not exceed the chance levels.
Lo que podemos ver entonces es que el elemento secuencial se da de manera sistemática, mientras que el simultáneo no supera las tasas, no supera el azar.
So one thing to bear in mind is that there could also be some coincidences, the chance co-occurrence, due to natural factors with posture, for example, just because of if you're sitting together in a certain space, how likely is it that your bodies will be in the same position? That might be fairly high according to chance.
De manera tal que lo que puede suceder es que haya coincidencia debido a hechos muy naturales de que si tú juntas a la persona y después en situación de cercanía van a haber tendencia a salir de los posturas corporales, por así decirlo.
And so we also see that in this context, the different types of behaviors have different dynamics.
En este contexto, los distintos tipos de conducta tienen diferentes dinámicas.
And one lesson we can take from this is we should be careful in interpreting simultaneous or concurrent performance of a behavior by interactants. It could just be that it was a matter of chance that they would be likely to do that.
Cuidado al interpretar las manifestaciones simultáneas de participantes porque se puede ver simplemente a azar.
And it's also then important to notice that certain behaviors are coupled with each other. So, for example, gesture use is highly coupled with speech use, especially among these speakers. And so that's something else, that's another factor that comes into play in terms of determining what's happening when.
Y hay que también tomar nota de que existe un acoplamiento entre gestos y habla, y ciertos gestos van acompañados de ciertas expresiones de habla, y ese es un factor que no hay que tomar en cuenta especialmente en esta conversación.
So the final part of this is we wanted to look at these time delays in the sequential alignment.
La parte final que queremos ver las demoras de tiempo en el alineamiento secuencial.
And then our question was,
Y la pregunta era si era diferente de trazar. Ok. Entonces tomamos todas las conductas que se simularon y se observaron en el mismo familia en la fotografía. Se calculó la distribución de la frecuencia de todas las brechas de tiempo entre el término de una conducta que hizo por un participante y el comienzo de la misma conducta de parte de otro participante. Y se comparó esto con una línea base.
and
Eso ya no me queda. ¿Cómo?
Compared to the chance basis. And so here's what we found. So these are all the behaviors clustered together. And so here is what our chance simulation produced, the red line.
Aquí están todas las conductas agrupadas juntas y en rojo está la línea aleatoria.
And the blue is what we actually observed.
Y lo que está en azul y lo que realmente ocurrió.
With these different time lags in 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds.
Y estas brechas de tiempo están expresadas en el intervalo de 5 segundos.
And what we saw is
Lo que vimos es que la mayoría del elemento secuencial ocurre muy rápidamente. Los puntos más altos de resonancia conductual corresponden a un solo segundo. Solamente se llega a un nivel de aleatoriedad alrededor de 20 segundos, habiendo codificado por pasado todas las conductas, y los participantes tienden a imitar la conducta de los demás inmediatamente después de observarla. Pero a veces eso ocurre con una demora considerable.
if we look at different specific behaviors, if we look at the posture and the gesture, then we have these kinds of pictures.
Conductas específicas como la postura o los gestos, tenemos esto.
And even though there was more variation in the individual behaviors than there was generalized across all, we see the same basic patterns playing.
Y a pesar de que se puede ver mucha más variación de lo que la reflexión, que pasa que el padrón básicamente es.
So while it appears that a substantial part of the joint activity of this remembering something in small groups actually does not take place verbally.
Da la impresión de que una parte importante de la interacción con esta persona no sucede verbalmente.
In some of this research on joint remembering, researchers make a distinction between the verbal behavior and everything else, co-verbal behavior.
En algunas investigaciones que se hacen al respecto se suele distinguir entre la conducta verbal y todo lo demás.
But our conclusion from these studies is that actually we should not be treating nonverbal behavior as one big category, but actually looking at it as a more heterogeneous category.
Lo que concluimos nosotros es que no da bien mirar la conducta no verbal como una sola cosa, sino que identificar el elemento exterior de ella.
And our evidence that we saw from the dialogic syntax and also just from lexical use itself can provide supporting arguments that the visible behavior that we're researching in some contexts and not in others that can support or question our analyses about how much that was a matter of chance.
Y lo que podemos ver de nuestros datos es que existe en cuanto a la sintaxológica argumentos que permiten pensar que el elemento no es simplemente una cosa aleatoria.
And I will finish with some acknowledgements, including thanking our hosts for inviting us here.
Y voy a terminar con un agradecimiento a la Fundación Alexander von Humboldt, a Lucas Vieri y a Carlos y la gente y su equipo por traernos.
And to our interpreter.
Y para mí, gracias.
you very much. I just want to clarify one thing. Because both tasks, we had photographs acting as a focal point. And if you didn't see simultaneity in the gaze, that means something I'm not understanding something, or they're behaving very strangely. Surely didn't look at the photo at the same time.
So are you talking, which part of the study should I go back to?
Where you had, yes, there you go, simultaneous gaze, the family conversation.
And the family.
So in the family.
Yeah, now there I'm finding that very,
Yeah,
very
so these were more, these were
photos, as a focal point.
But looking at it overall, I mean, part of it has to do with, I think, with the positioning of the people. If we go back to their situation in terms of how they were seated, I think this is also partly a factor. So whereas the friends were sitting around more closely around a table in maybe a more circular kind of setting, the three of them are sitting on a couch on the side, and she's sitting on a chair. And the guy on the left here, he is sometimes looking at the album. They are looking at each other. He's snacking. She's eating things. So there's also
means that they're looking at the same thing, does it? So because it seems you're missing something here. Then if I look at you and you look at me, we're not looking at the same thing. But surely that's important.
So we had several subcategories for what counted as the same or different. So for eye gaze, there were three different categories here. So this is, I mean, the numbers collapse some of these things. But did they have a common target or different targets? So that was one. And did they have, were they looking at another participant or not? So that was another one of the binary things. So these eye gaze, it collapses several different factors, actually. So that could explain it. Yeah.
I also have a point of clarification. When you showed the two columns and the chart, there were two columns. The right-hand side at the bottom was different foci of attention at different times. There, different foci at different times. What does that mean? That's everything.
Yeah. What I'm thinking, I was trying to think of a way to capture, the same and different distinction, both in terms of what they were looking at and how it played out in time. And so my thinking is that, right is?
Yeah.
So the idea is
that is different from the left, right? Because
so yeah.
Whatever they're looking at is simultaneous with something else.
Yeah.
So this could be, this also can refer to different kinds of behavior. It can refer to talk, can refer to eye gaze, can refer to gesture, whatever it is that they're doing. This is sort of just a general way I'm proposing to possibly think about this or understand it or help me in thinking about this somewhat. So the idea is at the bottom, this could be also a conversation with people turn taking, but talking about different things. So I talk about, it's a nice day today, and you say, I went to a movie last night. What do you want for lunch? And so that could also be different foci at different times. But it could also be people then looking at different things at different times.
How is that different from different foci at the same time? And what role does time play here?
So the idea, what I was thinking with that is, it's a way, if we have these different possible parameters, there's also cases where people are doing different things at the same time. And it's then when it's not by chance. And so like in this case of the conversation, starting to utter something at almost precisely the same time, there's a reason for that. It has to do something with how they were engaging with the conversation. One was talking about something with the waterfall, and then they each wanted to bring up different points. It wasn't just that one started and another started. It was like that was both a moment for both of them to go.
Some kind of reading of significance that is not clear from that table. That table is too neat. It's not.
It was just something I dreamt up as a way to think about this. I'm not laying great theoretical claims on it. It was just something that occurred to me as I'm looking at this. Wait a minute, if we have this also as a way to think about these as kind of clusters in some way.
It shouldn't be a complaint, but it's something that's important that needs to be teased out a little bit more.
Yeah.
From that example, you say they start at the same time, they're doing different things,
Yeah.
but they are in some sense responding to the same context.
Yeah.
So that time is in some sense special, and that's what's not shown. That needs to be pulled out here a little bit more. You're interpreting them as you're picking out this point in time because they seem to be responding to a common past. We're going into different futures.
Yeah.
And that's different from simply not doing the same thing. The time
Right, I agree.
Right.
To me, it struck me as that there has to be some kind of temporal frame in which this is the same thing at the same time or the same thing at different times.
Because you're talking about what one person did today versus yesterday is also different times, as opposed to what they were doing in the same context, sitting together. What I was trying to get at was just with the...
Fred said that, this sequential context of what's happening.
Yeah.
Whether they're responding to the same situation or not.
I'm happy to develop the little diagram further. It was, as I said, just something, an inspiration that I threw together as something, oh, this is neat, this sort of, it helps explain some things. But what I was trying to get at was how we have here different things going on, starting at the same time at the beginning of the video. He is saying something on the left here, looking down at the picture. He gets an idea, interacting with her, and both of these things happen at the same time. And so that's what I was trying to get at, that this is also, just saying, this is also a possibility in interaction, that it's not when things are happening at the same time, it's always this shared focus immediately of the same thing. They can have different foci of what they're looking at, but there's something about the rhythm of the interaction that then gets that going at the same time.
Okay, so it's not the thing happening at the same time or a different time, but it's a change that happens either simultaneously, non-simultaneously.
And what was interesting to me is that then the simultaneous things can be the same thing in a certain way. They can be both, two people can both be, finishing the same utterance at the same time with the same word, or there can be very different words being used here. Here also it's explained by the different focus of attention visually in what they're doing.
There was a talk yesterday of the notion of chironic time, which I think might be helpful here. You're using clock time. And it's this point in time is 3:37 on Sunday afternoon on the 17th of January 2015 or whatever it was. In fact, the reason that you're singling this out is because things happen with respect to other significant things in the interaction. So the way I like it, if a bear is fishing for salmon and the bear opens his mouth and catches a salmon, the right time for the salmon, in order for this event to happen, the right time for the bear's head to be here is not provided by clock time, it's provided by salmon jumping time. The right time for the salmon to be here is not provided by clock time, it's provided by bear head time. So that's this kind of relative timing that seems to single out this as, look here, there's something going on here.
And
it's not clock time.
And in this case, it was just operationalized in terms of clock time in order to deal with the video data and to try to parse it in some way. And so that was where we ended up with the 500
What is there a way to recode this that gets rid of clock time, that expresses his movement in terms of her movement, expresses his gaze in terms of her gaze, so that you look more densely at the patterns of the connection and not at the clock time, which is...
Part of it, the problem is that it wasn't motion capture recorded, it was video recorded, and
Yeah,
so then, so Lucas was... Exactly. So after seeing it so many times, you can have to say a lot. Lucas was dealing with the video material, trying to figure out how to manage it, and then also learning process. If you're new to doing video recording for this kind of research, you then see what you would do differently the next time. And, you know,
it's not a critique, it's a look.
oh, sure. Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, and Lucas tried to do different kinds of modeling, computational modeling of situations of what would be likely given what we had in the information. You know, so there's certainly other ways to approach it.
Yeah. Well, I like it very much in the distinction that you're doing here, and the using of vertical, horizontal, unavoidably brings to my mind Auerbach, Auerbach, and you know, if you know classical affinities, it's mimesis, and he uses exactly the vertical ways of contrasting discourse in a totally different philological way of thinking. But anyway, it brings to me this idea, this Auerbach idea, with that what you're observing here is a kind also in terms of rhythm different. Because in this second case, from my point of view, which you call more sequential, constructed, remembering, they are negotiating an image in the way that they see the picture there, and the man is, oh, we were at the waterfall, the waterfall, and the woman, yeah, we were there, and they are pointing at the same time. So they are negotiating a common picture of where, so they are, so to say, reenacting.
But also highlighting different aspects of it as well.
Exactly, and they are, for example, in my impression, the man is the first person who's proposing that, and the woman after that, and then the other two guys, you know. So they are constructing a common picture. Now the waterfall, and there is the waterfall, and you were there, and I was that. You know that this is a kind of sequential and more cognitive construction. And when you compare this image with what you call the vertical one, it's just a totally different cognitive task.
Yeah.
Who is the person who's not there?
Right.
Point. So it's a kind of 0-1.
Yeah, that's also our point.
And yeah, and you are there, and we all are involved in the answer. So in a way, what I'm trying to say that there's a rhythm different because of the cognitive tax are different. When you talk about the dialogical syntax, I see more poetry there. Trying to reproduce this. ¿Quién estaba ahí? ¿Quién no estaba ahí? Yo estaba ahí. Vos estabas ahí, flaco. Estaba ahí, flaco. You know, it's a kind of rhythmic repetition that it's a kind of exactly as in praying. When you're praying, it's a kind of repetition that you are trying to, in a vertical way, to reconstruct a common feeling. So, I don't know if I'm so clear to explain the point, but I perceive there's a kind of a different, you know, feeling that you're evoking in a different task.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
just to pick up on that point, when you see repetition like that, sequential repetitions where you get one structure, which is a pickup maybe by another person and done again. What comes to my mind is that what you're doing here is stabilizing some kind of common image, to use your words, enacting the same scenario. And that's why you're getting the repetition. For the same reason that you get repetition in prayer is because you have to do it again in order to keep it stable, to keep this identity going. So in this case, it's to keep this shared image of what was going on around the waterfall.
Yeah, particular picture.
Yeah. And again, methodologist who talks a lot about this very same thing, that one person will say something and another person will say something at times without Well, knowing what that means, and that helps to confirm the first person saying it. So it's exactly. It's exactly. It kind of is. It's not only like finding the common ground, but it's actually establishing, building, creating, maintaining. Right. Back to the vertical bars and the temporal aspect. The temporal part.
The results.
Yeah, where you're showing that, you know, in these things where most things are sequential. It's, what struck me here is that this would be totally different in a case like Fred's with joint speech, because there the motor action and the verbal action is essentially simultaneous, you would think. And because the past is so different, you're not trying to reconstruct. You're actually there already with your common ground. That's the.
But there are such moments of simultaneity or periods of simultaneity are embedded in more complex structures which have sequential structure to them as well. So it's a matter of perspective here. You can focus on the simultaneity, but if you pull back, you'd see something more like this.
Right, but at each moment, I mean, there would be change along, or you know, like waves of things. But what makes it joint is the simultaneity at almost every point. There's some simultaneity.
Right, but wherever you get that simultaneity, at some stage it's going to stop, but that doesn't mean people stop coordinating. Oh, that's embedded. Think of the liturgy in the Mass, for example. It's a very large linear structure in which people come together and they also engage in sequential exchanges and so on. So it's a bit more like a fossilized version of this, formalized version of this.
And I would also say that this is about an interaction in a small group doing a particular task. So this is, you know, other scenarios would then have probably different kinds of play out in different ways.
Right, and there might be moments in small groups where one thing will like trigger a collective
response.
It's like the Wizard of Oz. Okay.